Alright. I've been given the okay. So what is up, everyone? Back in the dead hours of the night, I have returned. This time of the game, I'm hopefully not going to go 40 minutes over estimate. Hopefully. I'm fairly experienced with this game, though, so I'll probably be just fine. But yeah, so, Equinox. For those that are not familiar with Equinox, this is the sequel to Solstice. So you're going to be seeing a lot of isometric platforming. It's also a very, very long game, and this time we're going to be doing something a little bit different than what we did last time. Last time we just kind of ran through the game as quickly as we could. But this time we're actually going to try to collect all the spells and all the weapons in the entire game. It's not really a category per se, but I kind of felt like, you know, it changes things up a little bit. So, might be a little bit fun to see some of the rooms that you otherwise would not see normally in an any percent run. So, I guess with that, let's get a file deleted here, or a game erased, and we'll get this started. So, here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. So right off the get-go, we just are thrown into the overworld. There's no real lore that this game throws in. It's all in the demo that they throw down the lore. But basically, we are the son of Shaddix, Glendale, and our entire goal is to save our father, who has been kidnapped by the evil witch Sonya. Of course, we don't... It's kind of... They kind of just throw you in here, so you're kind of just supposed to know what to do and figure it out on your own. But thankfully, the Dungeon of Galadonia sort of is very linear and kind of introduces what the main goal of each of these dungeons is. And that is to collect these 12 purple orbs that the game likes to call tokens, but orbs just makes more sense. It looks exactly like an orb. And we need 12 of these orbs to summon the boss in the dungeons. There's 8 in total. And why this is important is because in the overworld, there's new areas we can go to, but they're blocked off by spirits of these bosses, and you cannot pass them. You actually cannot pass them. So we have to actually vanquish these bosses. Thankfully, this first dungeon's actually very, very short. It's generally about like 4 or 5 minutes long. About the standard length of a Solstice speedrun. This game, however... Oh, well, I actually could have went for that, but a little bit risky to go for it, so better to take it safe and not lose my progress there. And this part's actually very consistent. You can see I just keep walking, and as long as I kill that one ghost in front of me, I don't really have to worry about running into him. Interestingly enough, every time you exit and enter a dungeon, the game will automatically be saved. So if you are worried about actually game overing, you don't have to, as long as you exit or enter a dungeon, it's automatically done. So here's the final area of the dungeon. We're gonna kill these ghosts because it will open the way to this door here. That's why the door is flashing there, if you were not 100% sure about that. And here is our first spell of the game. This is the heal spell, which is never gonna get used. It's a very useless spell. For every half a point of magic that you use with it, you gain half of your health bar back. So I guess I'll probably... Well, actually, hold on a second here. This is a very difficult jump. Let's see if we can do it. Yo, nailed it first try. Let's go. So yeah, the health bar. Technically, everything in this game kills you in one hit, and the room just restarts when this happens. But you... Well, okay, well, there you go. So that's what I was exactly talking about. Anything will kill you, but... technically you don't you have a left bar, and every time you actually die, you lose like half of a red circle on your life bar. If you take another hit and there's no life remaining on your life bar, then you game over and you start from the last point the game saved itself automatically. There is a different way to save the game, but it comes much, much later in the run. So, entering and exiting a dungeon is usually the more effective way to actually save your progress. Alright, so here's the first boss. And he's got a pretty questionable hitbox. Sometimes your knife will just whiff, and you kind of have to be out of this guy's way when he starts moving around like that. Also, if you do want to know, yes, the Fallen Brothers are responsible for the soundtrack of this game. Unfortunately, there is a bit of a problem with this game in that the audio is very, very inaudible. Like, it's extremely quiet. Some tracks are a little better about that, like the one you just heard. But for the most part, you're going to have trouble hearing the game over my voice. And sadly, that's just because the developers just kind of made the sounds inaudible. Or the music, for the most part. Okay, so Tori. Tori introduces a number of things. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9... Alright, cool, we got it. Had to make sure I counted my hits there. We're entering the dungeon from that point so we can get access to our shuriken weapon. We really want to upgrade the weapon as soon as possible because knife is really, really bad. And we want to get not only better damage output from the new weapon, but we can actually fire more with it. So things can die much, much faster, like these knights, for instance. Which, by the way, this is a really terrible enemy. You can't even kill them by any way other than on their backside there. And that was not a great outing, but we'll take it. So Tori, you can go a number of ways with Tori. It's a lot less linear than the previous dungeon, but no matter what way you go, you generally will end up in the same area as the final area of the dungeon. But basically this particular dungeon kind of introduces a number of elements like pushable blocks and different colored keys in order to just to kind of teach you, you need this color of a key to open this colored door. I mean, it seems like a self-explanatory thing, but it's very important that you are at least taught these things, because if you aren't, you're going to have a lot of problems getting through a number of dungeons later on. But yes, we're going to be dealing with this section here. This section used to be like the last part. Like, older speedruns of this game used to do this part last, just because many of the packs are much easier to deal with when you actually have the slow spell, which is the spell we're going to be getting in this dungeon. But it's actually faster to do this section beforehand, because one of the interesting things about the slow spell and the casting is that when you hit an enemy while they're affected by slow, they'll actually push themselves further forward, and like more so than other slowed enemies, and that kind of makes them turn around sooner, and it kind of throws everything out of a cycle anyway. So there really ended up being no actual benefit to using the slow spell when dealing with these packs. So that's kind of what caused me to change the route in this particular dungeon. Every time I actually enter another, like, every time I hit a doorway to enter the next room, I try to tap the B button at times, and that's because if you do that, you can frame perfectly jump on the very first frame as you enter the next room. And this does save some time in like, sometimes it can save as much as 5 to 6 seconds depending on the room. So it is something to watch out for from time to time. Alright, so just so we don't confuse ourselves, we're going to call these sections where the ladder drops down as a lobby, which is a place basically that you can enter and exit a dungeon from. By the way, a nice little skip there. If you actually push that gate, you actually can avoid taking a hit to that falling gate. It's really nice. Doesn't work with most of them though, so you do have to be careful about that. Alright, very nice. Got ourselves another green key. And this guy's got ourselves got an orb here, so we gotta kill him. Very nice kill. That was close. Alright, so this next room is what we call the shooting gallery. And this is... we're gonna be hanging on this ledge here and just sniping them off as they come. Generally, it's not a good idea to walk around and follow these ghosts because you likely will just fall off the ledge. Or worse, you'll get hit, and that's not good. Also, a nice little screen wrap there. If you jump high enough and you hit the ceiling, you actually can screen wrap. And here's our spell of the dungeon right here. And we're going to immediately switch to slow, because slow is much more useful than heal here. Immediately start using it in a lot of situations here, because some of these packs have very questionable hitboxes. Whoops. Actually gonna reapply that slow there. And here comes one of the worst tricks in the game. We're gonna give it just one more try here. This is what we call the spike jump. It's a frame-perfect trick where you can jump off the spike. And as long as you're pushing something, you can actually jump off of it. Jump off of a spike. I think that's my best understanding of it. It might not be 100% correct, but yeah, you can jump off the spikes, and it's a frame-perfect trick, and it's terrible because this is a 60 FPS game, or this runs at 60 frames a second, so you can imagine something frame-perfect in a game that runs like that is not easy to execute. That was really close. So we're actually almost done with this dungeon. It's not a very long one either. Alright. Sort of messed that room up. Like, yeah, if you want to know, if you do cast magic, you can actually jump out of it and cancel the whole animation of Glendale flexing there. And you can also attack. You can either attack or you can jump out of it. So, it does save a little bit of time to actually do that in a lot of situations. Okay, so now that we're done with Tori, I guess let's talk somewhat about these bosses. So interestingly enough, in the any % run, it doesn't matter what weapon you use to hit these bosses. Their health is hit-based. So they only just take a certain number of hits, and it does not matter what type of weapon you use to deal with them. So that's why in the any % run, we actually do skip quite a few weapons. But yeah, the gist of Sung Sung in general is just to stay ahead of them. It's much like the previous fight with Bonehead. You have to kind of stay ahead of them, and just as long as you know the pattern and know what's coming up, you will always be able to react. And the best part about this particular run is that there's almost no randomness in this game. You might think there is, but there isn't. Even some of the ones that seem to act randomly actually do have a certain kind of AI that you can manipulate to do exactly what you want to get past the hazards, so to speak. And this particular dungeon actually has such an enemy that does seem to act randomly, but that's exactly how they work. Now this room is terrible. Let's see if we can actually do it though. Yeah, we're gonna have to reset that room. Let's try this again. Okay, well that's fine. We can just jump off of the block there. And hopefully not get hit by this ghost. So if you want to know, ghosts' hitboxes are kind of indicated by the shadow. So if your shadow aligns with their shadow, they're gonna hit you. So you do have to be cautious of that. Okay, so Dieso's kind of the opposite of Tori. You might have noticed that in Tori, I didn't really go to the overworld at all. Like, I didn't exit the dungeon at all. And that's actually the fastest way of doing Tori. But in Dieso, it's actually the opposite. You want to actually travel in the overworld. And that's because many of these areas that we're going to are kind of locked away by all these white locked doors, or these white caged doors, and many of the keys are kind of way out of the way in this dungeon, so we're actually going to be skipping a number of keys in this dungeon, and only taking the ones that we actually need to clear the dungeon and actually get to the boss. So, there's a little bit of backtracking in this dungeon, but it's not too bad. There's going to be some worse offenders when it comes to backtracking in dungeons, unfortunately. This is actually, I think, the only situation where we do have to do a little bit of backtracking. Oops, come on. Now here's where we can stop backtracking, because this section is wide open. This is sort of the centralized area of Dieso. Let's see if we can borrow this ledge. Oh, we went way too early on that jump. Let's try again. There we go. See? It's not too bad. I mean, some of these jumps look real sketch. Like, I will not even deny that. But sometimes you just need a little bit of a visual cue to know when to jump. And that ghost there that's carrying this block, he's actually one of only 2 random elements in the entire game. Sometimes what ends up happening is when that block lands on his head, he sometimes likes to go back. And when that happens, I'm forced to steal the block from him, and then carry the block over the corner. It's like a 5-second time loss. It's pretty minor. Oh, we messed up the sushi bar, though. Let's try that again. I'd like to do this the correct way. Let's see if we can do it, though. Yeah, we got it. There we go. Just hold that one single direction, and not only do you get it off the sushi bar, but it's actually the optimal way of getting through this room the quickest manner possible. And here's a nice little trick where if I have that block there that dropped off my head, if it's almost at the point of falling off my head, all I have to do is jump away from it, and I can actually knock it off my head really consistently. Also, this room's quite a mess. You can see how this is the dungeon where perspectives start to kind of mess with you a bit, which is kind of the special thing about this game. Like, isometric platforming can be kind of a difficult thing to navigate, and most people just don't just can't comprehend the perspective trickery games like this will tend to throw at you from time to time. Also, those tornadoes you saw in the previous room, those are the enemies I was talking about earlier that act really, really randomly. But for the most part, they're programmed to track you down. So they're not, as long as you know that, you can easily bypass them pretty consistently. They can sometimes be difficult to deal with, though, depending on how badly you mess up the room where they're in. Also, here, I love this room right here. It's just a whole stack of blocks, and the perspective just completely hides it. And here, we want to push this block. I want to drop off. Push this block again. And there we go. So here, we're going to have our axe, and we're going to swap. We're going to swap to the axe here. Axe can fire many more than the shuriken, and it's a much faster moving weapon. And it does more damage to regular enemies. So that's also something that's really, really neat. And that will come in... That will come in major... that will come in handy come the next fight. So we're going to utilize the slow here like we do normally. And the axe can just make very, very quick work of him. It's still really the only way to actually do that room is... Unfortunately, you have to wait on the gate there. Like, that ghost moves way too fast. You can't really outrun him if you don't slow down time there. So we actually have all the white keys to actually get to the boss, but we do need the spell still, which is a detour that we cannot avoid, even in any percent. We haven't found a way to, and it's right over here. Okay, so now that we have the damage spell... Oh, yeah, I guess I should probably talk about that spell. So the damage spell, what that does is it's a room-wide attack. It hits everything in the room, and it does a fair chunk of damage. Most things will die in about 3 uses of it, but each time you use it, it uses up like 1 full circle and then half a green circle. And that's another thing I should probably mention. Each spell progressively each spell that you get from a newer dungeon costs a half a point of magic more than the previous one did. So, like, the heal spell costs half a circle of magic, the slow does a full circle, and the damage one does the circle and a half, etc., etc. Now, this fight, much easier with the axe, as you can see. Timing your hits is not quite as crucial. Just have to get in position. It's actually a much trickier fight with the shuriken, because whereas this weapon has quite rapid fire, shuriken, you can only fire 2 at a time. So, the axe really comes in handy on this fight. Doesn't do any more damage, though. And we had a perfect fight. Didn't even get a chance to touch the wall. So now that we're done with Deso, it's time to move on to Atlina, the underwater dungeon. Oh boy, the underwater dungeon, everyone's favorite. Thankfully, though, this underwater dungeon has no swimming in it. Also, that was a nice little skip there that you probably... Alright, well, D-pad's doing some weird stuff now. Wow, my throat's kind of clogging up now. That place looked like it wasn't really much of an actual skip of sorts, but you technically are supposed to come to this area through a different means, because that's where the spirit of the third dungeon was at. So you might think, that looks like a perfect opportunity to skip that boss entirely, but unfortunately, no. Because if you haven't been paying attention, and I don't blame you if you haven't, each of these bosses has a string of a harp, and you need the first 5 to be dead in order to get the entire 5 strings for your harp. And this is very, very important in order to get to the 6th dungeon. Wow. Okay. Probably would be better to just die there, but we're just gonna try again. It's fine. It's whatever. So, with that being said, let's talk about this dungeon here. So as I said, no swimming here. However, your jumps are a lot floatier, and your jump, not only is your descent floatier in general with your jumps, you jump a lot higher. And this is actually done intentionally in order to actually do many of these jumps. Like, that jump probably would not have been possible without the extra height that was granted to your jump in this dungeon. And interestingly enough, that change to your jump kind of came with a bit of an oversight. And that oversight won't become apparent until we reach quite a ways of progression through this dungeon. First, though, we're going to try to grab our spell here. It's right in this room here. Going to just do a couple of extra jumps just to make sure we land our jumps. I forgot that those things were next to each other. Okay, then, let's try that again. Oh. Yeah, so if you want to know why am I moving so oddly on these platforms, some of these things are actual conveyor belts, so you're actually jumping against, you're kind of moving against them, in a sense. I still have axe. And I need to kill this slime in order to open the way. Alright, there we go. Get out of this portion. And then we're gonna actually head back to the previous lobby that we were at. And this seems like a kind of a waste of time when you think about it. Or it seems like a waste of time at first glance, because you might think, would it not be faster to enter there, for instance? But actually no, because we will be running across that lobby within the dungeon itself at some point. And each of these lobbies are kind of locked away by different colored doors on each side. So, you know, this is kind of one of those dungeons where it's a maze, to put it lightly. It's really hard to know where you're supposed to go here. And in a lot of cases, a lot of keys just get wasted here because because they usually how this dungeon is, or how this dungeon is designed, is that it kind of loops all over the place and connects with one another. And because it is designed that way, there's a lot of actual locked doors in this dungeon that you don't even really need to unlock. Oh, wow, we actually missed that jump. Okay, so now we're going to have to wait for this block to come back, and we're going to try this jump again. There we go. Got it this time. And now let's do the truly difficult part of this dungeon. This is what I like to call the trio of trials, because there are some very, very tough jumps, and if you don't cut that corner really tightly, you're going to get tagged by that slime. And here's another jump that's not very friendly either. And this one loses you about 15 seconds if you mess it up. Alright, we got one. Nice. We avoided the 15-second time loss. Now time for the hardest room in the dungeon. Okay, well that's not the worst way you can lose time in this room. Oh boy. Yeah, that was way too late. So, yeah, these jumps are very, very tight. But thankfully, if you keep moving, you can make these jumps consistently. Can I make this? Yes! Let's go. That's how clean that room can be. But of course, it can go real badly if you don't actually item jump off that orb. Actually, now that I think about it, I don't think I really explained the item jumping. So you can actually jump off of an item. It's a pretty generous window. I think it's like at least 4 frames. Might be even more than that. But you can actually jump off of items in order to gain some extra elevation and, you know, jump back to other platforms and whatnot. And it does save a fair bit of time to actually learn that particular aspect of, or that particular trick. So here's a lobby here that we haven't entered from yet, and we're kind of just using up, we're kind of trying to finish off this section here. We're using our last red key in order to get this one orb here. It's very, very important I do this dungeon in the order that I'm doing it in, because the color keys are very, very much scattered throughout. So routing this particular dungeon is very, very complex. Like, it takes a lot of brainstorming to figure out, you know, what's the fastest means of getting through this dungeon. It's not quite like, you know, a lot of the dungeons, at least up to this point, have kind of a pretty simple route to go by, and it's pretty well understood why they're faster, but it's not so clear here. But a couple rooms from now is the reason why the route is what it is with this dungeon. And speaking of the design oversight from earlier, there it is right there. So normally you cannot jump over spikes in this game. Like, you literally cannot jump over spikes. But because the developers changed the property of your jumps here, you actually can jump over spikes. It's the only time in the entire game where you can. There is one special moment, though, where you can jump over spikes. However, we're not going to see that happen in this particular category. And that's just because there's really no need to. It's actually a way unsafe option compared to the normal way of doing it. And, you know, you got, in this category, you have like a whole lot of magic to work with. Just because with each new spell you gain, your magic pool actually increases 1 extra point. So by the end of this run, you're gonna see Glendale have a much bigger magic pool compared to his health pool, which I guess probably should bring me to the next point. How do you increase your health beyond just killing bosses? There are these ogres in the overworld that you can kill, and killing them gives you an extra point of health. Which I guess if we were to make this an actual category, I probably would have to include that as well into the route. Alright, so we're going to actually switch to Twin Knife here. Twin Knife has a very special property. You can actually attack from behind as well, making it a very, very helpful weapon to utilize. So we're going to utilize the slow here to slow down these ghosts. And grab this token here. We got 2 more to grab, and they're not actually far from the boss room, which is another reason why the route is the way it is here in Atlina. Okay. So right in here is our last orb. And with Twin Knife, we don't even need to use magic to actually deal with the green slime there. Now, let's head back to that sequence breaking room. And we're going to finally find out what that trail of spikes was actually trying to lead us to. Nice jump over the spike again. That's not the most generous window to get past. So, that was actually very, very clean Adelina. You know, aside from pretty much the toughest room in that dungeon. So, that was really good. Now, this fight is easily probably the bane of most players who do remember this game. There aren't many of them, but many people do who have played this game probably will remember this fight. And it's really terrible. But how it works is the weak point of Pincha here is his eyes. Each of these eyes can take 10 hits per. The problem with this, though, is that his right side tends to leave itself open for far longer than the left side, like as you saw there. So very often you're gonna kill the left side or the right side much sooner than the left side. So there's gonna be quite often we're going to find the left side surviving for quite a bit longer. And this is kind of the unfortunate thing about this fight. Thankfully, though, Twin Knife does make this a very consistent fight, and we will kill this crab long before he becomes an issue. Or long before we end up losing about like 20 plus seconds because he resets and starts his whole pattern again. Okay, so now that we're done with Adelina, we can now move on to Quagmire. And Quagmire, well, I would say Quagmire is an interesting dungeon, but that's actually not true. And I will also say this is the worst overworld portion of the run. Like, it is really hard to not get caught like I just did there. It's just a really awkward overworld to navigate. And yeah, the other problem with Quagmire is there's a lot of backtracking to it. So how this whole dungeon works. Think of how Adelina kind of scatters its keys all throughout the dungeon. You kind of just have to navigate your way around it like one giant maze. Well, the idea with Quagmire is that they kind of throw all the keys in the middle of the dungeon, and you're kind of supposed to find these keys first before kind of getting to where all the orbs are, which is through all these branching hallways that kind of extend out from the internal portion of the dungeon itself. I'm gonna swap to damage here. I'm gonna replenish our magic as well with that pink potion. And we're gonna walk in just the perfect way so that green tornado does exactly what we want. But yeah, where was I? Oops. Yes, there we go. So, where was I going with that? Alright, so, yeah, Quagmire, you're supposed to find all the keys in the central area of the dungeon, and then all the branching hallways that kind of extend out, they have all your orbs to summon the boss. So, technically, we really do need these keys in order to progress, or that's at least what we think. In reality, we only need, I think, like 5 of the 8 keys. And that's because most of the locked doors are just surrounding each of the lobbies of this dungeon. And they kind of... The lobbies are kind of in the spot. They're kind of in... How do I explain this? They're, I guess, the base of the starting point of the hallways. Like here, for instance. This is actually a lobby, and there I opened up a blue door, and now I opened up another one. And that's kind of how most of the lobbies function in this dungeon. So, in theory, this was kind of a clever design, but execution, it wasn't quite as good as one might think. But that doesn't mean it isn't like a good dungeon, a fun dungeon in its own right. There are some very, very tricky rooms, and this one in particular is kind of sketch. There's also a number of different platforms we're also going to be dealing with, including ones where if we stand on them, they start to move. And that's a particular key point in this room right here, where we have to jump off of it almost as soon as we get on it so that we have a safe way back. It's kind of designed to be like that sort of trap room where, you know, they make you think you've successfully managed to get to the orb, but you don't have a safe way to get back. So, in that situation, you have to try again. So I think I haven't... Actually, I think I have already mentioned it, but yeah, there's a lot of backtracking in this dungeon. This is probably the worst offender among all the dungeons. I mean, that's arguable, actually. I mean, there is the Ice Palace. I am surprised I made that jump. Okay. I'm probably dead. Yep. So I missed that platform completely. And I should probably also mention that platform, that previous room had a platform. If you do have to kind of be careful how you stand on them, because if the platform actually does try... If you stand too close to the ledge and the platform moves the other direction, you'll get nudged a little bit. And if you're close enough to the edge, that will mean death, because you'll just get knocked straight off the platform. You can kind of visually see it. Nice job. You can kind of see it, though. Thinking one room too far ahead. So let's see if we manipulate. Good. Actually manipulated that perfectly. So here is yellow side. This is the yellow hallway. It's going to take us to more orbs, but more importantly, it's going to take us to our spell. I'm also really sketched out by this room. This room tends to be... That room tends to be really, really awful. And it's awful because sometimes when you land on a smaller platform and there are spikes that kind of rise up higher than the smaller platform, sometimes you'll land on the smaller platform and then just die as you land on it. And that's because more than half of Glendel's spray here is overlapping the spike. But sometimes the perspective does not make that so clear. And very often you'll get a very janky death in that room. It's terrible. But it's something you have to be kind of aware of. I did not manipulate that properly. Let's try that again. So I'm going to shimmy here a little bit, and that will cause the tornado to go that way. I completely messed that up. And I'm going to swap to slow here. Okay. And we want to swap to slow so that we can ride that, jump over that slime. Now the return trip's not so bad. You can see how I'm kind of walking, like, you can see how I'm kind of walking over the spike a bit. It doesn't seem to make much sense why I'm not dying there, but those spikes can really only kill you if you're on the smaller platform, if you actually land on it and more of it overlaps the spikes. It's really, really bizarre. Like, it's hard to really explain unless you actually sit down and play this game. And, you know, become victim to some of the shenanigans this game has to offer. Like I said, I love this game to pieces, but there is some real interesting things that have happened to me in this game. Now, let's see if we can get this. Nice, got the platform cycle, which means I got that on the first possible moment. And that's pretty much the hardest part of Blue's side, was that getting that platform cycle there. Everything else is very, very straightforward. This ghost here is very easy to deal with Twin Knife, as you just saw there. Really taking advantage of that weapon, being able to fire backwards. And once again, you can see how these tornado enemies seem to be hard to deal with, but as long as you do move exactly the way you always should, the tornadoes will be... The tornadoes will do... You won't have to worry about them kind of trolling you. It's only when you actually change your movement do they start to mess with you. So you do have to be aware of that. So we got everything we need here. The only thing we're missing is one extra orb, which is in this one little room right over here. There we go. Now let's head out Blue side. We got one more hallway we have to deal with now, which contains our last two orbs. And it also contains our sword, our next weapon. That was way too early of a jump. It's a bit of a time loss when you miss your jumps in the overworld, but generally speaking, generally speaking, if you miss your jump, it's not like that terrible. The only thing you have to worry about in the overworld is the encounters that you may have seen. Actually, I know you've seen it because I saw them for a brief moment. But yeah, there are ogres and there are bats. You do not want to get into an encounter with any of those. If you do, though, you can die. You can just immediately touch them and just die that way. Oh. I did this room a little bit wrong, so we're going to try to adjust this a little bit. Gonna wait, and we're gonna kill this guy. Normally, we don't do that in the 80% run, but you know, there's really no reason not to do it in this particular category. We have the stronger weapons, so it's not really a big time loss to kill them. It's like minor. So yeah, more conveyor belts we're fighting against here. And now we're gonna grab this final orb, and then we're gonna head into that room. That's where the sword is. And this next upcoming room is one of the hardest platforming I think in the entire game. Let's see if we can actually do it though. Okay. So I want to get right on this edge. Okay, good. We're on it. And we missed it. Yeah, these jumps are not very, very kind. Let's see if we can do it again though. Let me try and get... Okay. We got it. Oh. There we go. And we're actually not going to swap to the sword, because the sword is actually a lot slower moving of a weapon. And there's not the advantage of extra swords to throw around, both behind you and in front of you. I think you can only throw like 2 swords at a time. It does hit harder, though, so there is that. So one more return trip. Thankfully, we can take a little bit of a shortcut here. And we're gonna just quickly do this room, because that's where our last orb is. If we do this... Thankfully, this is one of those rooms where you don't even really have to do it optimally. You just... Even if you hit like a wall or something, that's actually ideal, because that gives the ghost enough time for the block to land on its head. And then for you to be able to jump onto the block and subsequently make your way to the orb there in one single jump cycle. Alright, so back to where we were at the start of this dungeon. But this time, this door here is open. We did that because... That door opened because we killed a slime. And it actually was our boss room. So hey, time for probably my least favorite fight, I think. Dolop has a very questionable hitbox, as you saw there. And in most parts of this fight, he's not got his weak point open for long. And the worst part is, at least in any percent, you can really only afford to miss 2 hits. If this happens, you are forced to deal with an extra set of ads. Or an extra set of enemies. I won't call them ads. I always do that out of... I always call them ads out of reflex, but it's just an extra 2 slimes. But the pattern's always the same, so as long as you know that, you can be in position long before he gets there. And as long as you know that, and position yourself accordingly, you can land your hits. But sometimes the janky hitboxes can screw you, and it's not fun when it happens. So far, we've had a perfect fight. If you want to know when the enemies and slimes do come out, it's when this guy turns slightly transparent. And we're kind of just utilizing the zap spell here to quickly clear them out. And I guess while this fight's kind of going on, since there's really nothing much more to truly explain, the zap spell, in case you were wondering, the zap spell is basically a modified version of the damage spell, except instead of just doing a standard set amount of damage to enemies, it kills all enemies in the room in a single use. It is incredibly overpowered. Like, it is disgustingly overpowered. And it actually still surprises me to this day that the oldest speedrun that has ever been done of this game never even used it, despite the fact an orb was literally like a room away from it. But, you know, we remedied that over time. So yeah, if you do end up missing your hits on Dolop, it does end up... You potentially lose like at least 30 seconds. It's pretty awful. Okay, well now that we are done... Oh, by the way, there's an enemy you can encounter in the overworld. But yeah, back to what I was talking about a bit earlier. The strings of a harp. We've defeated the first 5 bosses, so now we have our harp. And now time to see its use in full power. And we are transported to a completely different continent if we do it right there. And this is the continent of Afrolona. This is where our 6th dungeon is at. Also, if you want to know how I'm rotating the overworld there, it's the shoulder buttons. God bless the Super Nintendo controller. Alright, so last time I did this room, I think I died like 6, 7, 8 times. And we got it first try. Yeah! Let's get it. Already off to a much better start. So Afterlone is actually the opposite of Quagmire in that where in Quagmire the keys are all centralized in one area of the dungeon. Most of the orbs in this dungeon can be collected without even needing to unlock any doors. However, there is another really important part of the dungeon that is very much barred away from access for us without many of these keys, and that is the boss room itself. So we are still going to need these keys. But there is some we will skip because we don't really need them. And coming up is a very important skip. Gonna grab all these keys and then skip having to use a red key by going out the way we came. The other side has a locked red door, and if you end up using a red key to open it, it's this door by the way, then you have to get a different red key somewhere. So obviously we skipped quite a decent chunk of time just from doing that. Okay, this room. This room right here is a big, big time loss if I do mess it up, because if I do mess it up, I have to reset the room, because I get only one shot to grab this orb. Oh, come on, there we go. Can we get it? Nice, got it. So if you do miss that jump, you have to reset the room and get these blocks reset. And that's at least about 20-25 seconds you lose for missing that jump. We got it. First try, though. We're nailing this run. This is actually really, really good. This is quite the opposite of how my other run went. Yeah, bit of a perspective, bit of a tricky room to navigate perspective-wise there, but it's not too bad. So we're gonna kind of loop around and back to the main centralized area of this dungeon. But before then, we're going to collect our weapon, which is quite a ways out of the way. There's a large series of enemies we have to kill in order to actually get it. I'm going to be taking a detour here this time. I'm going to jump over here and go this way. And over here, grab that. Very close to actually taking a hit there. And we're going to zap literally everything we see here. Grab an extra pink potion. And yeah, you can see how many enemies you have to fight through just to be able to reach the weapon room, which is right here. Now, this room is very, very ambiguous what you're supposed to do. But in order to actually get to this weapon, there's a lot of invisible blocks, which is the new element they added into this particular dungeon. But we need this block here to carry us over. Whoops. And yeah, there's invisible blocks just blocking you from gaining access to that weapon. So now that we got that, let's swap to the scimitar and make our way back to the general area that we were going to be heading to. Just making sure I don't run into a spike. There we go. And this time we're going to go this way. And we're going to wait on grabbing that potion. We're going to grab this here, and then we're going to fail our jump, and we're going to try again. Let's see, maybe this time I'll get it. Okay, perfect. That's what I was doing wrong. Kill that ghost with our final use of zap, and then get a white potion that's kind of hidden there to fully replenish everything. I'm going to use zap again just to kind of cut down the lag. When is all room percent? If you want all rooms percent, that's probably more PJ's. That's probably more PJ's forte. I'm not really keen on learning all rooms. Maybe next time I'll probably do a revised version of this category where we actually kill all the ogres. When I actually understand the ogres and how, you know, which ones I actually have to kill to gain an extra bit of life. But yeah, if you want to know, all rooms is where you travel to all the rooms, and it's a fairly lengthy category because sometimes you're just going to forget a room. And knowing me, I'm going to forget one, people are going to tell me it, and I'm not going to read chat when that happens, which will then mean I end up not properly completing the run. Because this game's kind of complex. There's a lot of things that people just don't really know about with this game. And they do beg explaining. They do absolutely need explaining. So here's another lobby here. And interestingly enough, we're going to exit and enter the dungeon from that particular lobby. And there's a very specific reason why we do this, and I will take that time now to explain. But every time you defeat a boss, it will actually warp you to the last point you entered a dungeon from. So in this case, we wanted it to be here, because that is the closest point to the next dungeon. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna wait for that ghost. I probably could have beat him out, but I was not willing to take that chance. So, now that we've got all the orbs, we now just need the keys to access. Well, actually, we don't have all the orbs. What am I talking about? There is a few more we still need to grab, but they'll be coming... They're still in very accessible areas. I'm gonna reset this room. We also need to grab the spell in this dungeon, which is in this section here. And this spell, if you want to know what this spell is, it's the save spell. So, saving in this game, as I said before, you have to enter in or exit the dungeon in order for the game to automatically save. However, you can actually save within a dungeon, and that is through the use of this spell. But it's a very it's a very costly spell. It's about, I think, yeah, it's three full points of magic to save, to use the save spell in this game. So, and oftentimes we want the magic to be able to go fast in the speedrun. So you're not going to see the spell used at all. Sorry, everyone. I know everyone probably wants me to use it at least once, but it's not going to happen. Magic is a very valuable resource in this game, and we do want to take advantage of it where we can. And since we have the expendable magic, we can actually deal with those knights instead of having to kind of veer around their walking pattern. So a little bit of backtracking here, but not too much. We're gonna just jump over here. Yeah, probably didn't know that was there, probably, did you? But yeah, it's there. And this time we're gonna go this way, and this will lead us to yet another kind of hidden room that leads us towards where the boss room is. But first we gotta grab this orb right here, and now we have them all. I'm gonna pop that to continue going fast. And yeah, here's the hidden room right over here. So yeah, that's kind of something I didn't even bother to actually mention, but yeah, the game eventually... Nice job. Eventually, this game likes to throw in a bunch of hidden rooms because, you know, this game has to throw in at least one nuisance of a game design into their games. Usually, though, they like to try to make it easy enough to spot. Like, they'll try to throw a whole bunch of blocks in between a gap to make you be able to spot it easier. But it's not so easy to spot. It's just one of those kind of things that you're gonna probably find out the hard way where you're supposed to go. Alright, good. I needed that potion. And now here's another gauntlet of enemies we're gonna just kill one after the other through the use of Zap. And just like that, we're done with Afrolona. So time for the most mind-numbing fight of the game, which I'm not really, like, I'm never really was like super knowledgeable about, you know, Egyptian history and whatnot, but this boss's name is Isis, named after the Egyptian god. I used to think it was just sort of named after, well, not really named after the Islamic State or something like that, but I completely forgot there was a Egyptian god called Isis in history. But basically, this entire fight is basically the same mind-numbing thing. It's just stand in the correct spot, don't move from the wall as he moves around. He has a very broken hitbox. Like, he basically can't hit you as long as you stand in the correct spot. And as long as you stand in that spot, the basketballs are gonna miss, and he's gonna miss you, as long as you're hugging... Well, I mean, hugging the wall is not even correct. Like, I'm just standing here. Like, look at this. There's just no way... There's no way this guy does not have a broken hitbox. Like, that should so easily hit you, but it just doesn't. And that's all there is to the fight. Oh, I'm aware Isis is a she. Goddess, man. It's an Egyptian goddess. But I originally thought that it was all like a part of Illuminati, that that the name just sort of blended. Like, at that time, everyone kind of knew about Islamic State around the time I started running this game, so... That's kind of why I brought that whole thing up. Anyway, it's not important now. What is important, though, is this dungeon right here. Ghost Ship is, at least in any percent, it's probably the most technical dungeon in the entire run. It's not nearly as hard in this particular category. I'm surprised I even made that jump. So... I'm sure everyone here has played Mario Maker. Do you know those kind of levels where you kind of are supposed to pick a door or something like that, try to figure out which one's the correct one? Well, this dungeon's kind of designed similarly. It's kind of a maze trying to figure out which passageway is the correct way to go, but usually every dead end leads you to an important item of sorts, so it is important to make sure you know exactly where you're going. This particular kind of jump is really, really hard to do, and I have to basically just know when I'm supposed to jump and angle my jump to cut down running there to save a mere 6 to 7 seconds, which I obviously didn't manage to pull off because I died, but it's okay. Angle jumps in this dungeon are very, very hard to do because you kind of just have to go by hard and hope you make the jump. It's absolutely not a generous set of jumps to pull off, but thankfully it's thankfully not something you have to do too often in this dungeon. But you will see me try to do it from time to time. Alright, so getting to this orb can be pretty difficult as well. Pretty precise jumps, we got it. Yeah, so one of those boxes actually drops down, and if you don't immediately jump off of it, the box will just sink down, and it is very, very difficult to try and get the elevation to reach the next box. I'm gonna kind of share this corner here and, you know, completely dodge the ghost, because, like I said before, the shadow is the hitbox of the ghosts. Wow. I'm surprised that I made that jump. Alright, that's close. So, here's another dead end, but it contains another orb. So we're just gonna go that way. And grab it. And then we're gonna go back out the way we came. And this is kind of the theme of Ghost Ship in a nutshell. Some dead ends, though, do take you to... Some dead ends do take you to where you don't actually want to go, though. It doesn't actually lead you anywhere. There is a point in this dungeon where the pathway sort of splits off. And technically, there's no wrong way to get to the end of the dungeon, but it's a lot faster to go one way over the other. So we're gonna go that one way, but that won't be for a little bit. Oops, I'm gonna reset that room. Now, this room is the second time there is a bit of randomness. Let's see if the ghost behaves exactly the way we want. Yes! And we saved ourselves quite a bit of time. Let's go. So we got the ghost to behave exactly, to move directly diagonal and to the south. And that leads us directly to our orb in that room. So we did that room basically perfectly, which is nice. Now here's another sketchy room right here. We're gonna just nudge the box just like this, and then we're gonna jump towards the spikes a little bit and try to slowly but surely push this box forward. We're working against conveyor belts on the floor there, and that's why I'm kind of constantly jumping like that. Again, anytime it looks like I'm jumping for no reason, just assume I'm working against conveyor belts. It's usually the safe bet. Oops, I'm gonna do that room again. And yeah, here's another hidden room. Let's see if we get this item jump. Yeah! We're nailing these jumps, this is good. I can't stress enough that a lot of these jumps do look easy. Like, I do make them look easy, but they're not. They're absolutely not. They do require quite a bit of practice to nail down the timing of. And in a lot of cases, you do have to use like a visual cue to know when exactly you need to jump for certain particular jumps. Alright, so this room here, if I mess this room up here, at the very worst, I can lose up to a minute. There is a lot of pushing blocks here. And we're going to be creating a stack. I'm going to move the box here. Or move the barrel. And now I'm going to move the box. I'm going to move it just enough to get on this barrel here. So we can create a stack. And we're going to need one more piece in order to reach the orb in this room. And we're going to actually kind of stack it in a very odd manner here. But it's very important we stack it like this because, as you're about to find out, I've already created half the staircase just from creating the stack like this. Now, I'm going to push the block, and you can see half of it is now formed. So now what I'm going to do is I just need to push the stack over to where the orb is, and then create the last half of the stairway, and there's the orb. So that's how the room is supposed to be done. If you actually do mess up the stacking, especially when you're onto the third block, you lose about a minute. It's very, very costly. So, well, actually, no, it's probably more like 40 seconds in that part. But if you mess up and you accidentally push a part of the stair off of the stack, then you're going to lose about a minute. And that's very, very costly. Now let's see if we can beat this gate cycle. Alright, cool. And here's another pretty ambiguous puzzle. Just stand right here, and the block's just going to rise up. We're going to do another screen wrap. Perfect. And we skipped that gate cycle as well. We are on a roll. Let's go. Pop another zap here because we got some more magic at our disposal. And now we're actually coming up to one of the rooms where I really hyped it up a lot in any percent because it's the only other situation where you can jump over a spike, and that is through the use of item jumping on a still airborne item. But we're not actually going to do that in this particular case. We have a strong enough weapon to kill the knight that is going to spawn to, I guess, Glendel's right here. And we want to kill this knight first before we move forward, because if we do use the zap to kill them all, the apple will spawn right where that knight was at. Instead, because we killed them already and zapped the other two, the apple appeared over there, and we used it to skip that gate cycle. Oh, come on. This jump set, those set of jumps are terrible too, by the way. And we're going to use one more zap here, and here is the weapon. Now, I'm going to quickly swap to mace, and we're going to swap to slow. And this is important we swap to these particular weapons and spells, because we're also coming up to the spell in this dungeon as well. It's another hidden room over here. And we're going to grab this green key. Take a nice little ride. Jump at the right time, and we will get that in one single cycle. Oops. And now we gotta kind of work fast here. Get on this gate here. And we got the spell. Good. So we're probably gonna die as soon as this is done. Yep. Every time. It happens every time. It doesn't really matter, though. So now, we're gonna swap back to Zap. That's the reveal spell. So the reveal spell... Oh man, the reveal spell is all sorts of special. And you're never gonna see it get used because it's really, really bad. But basically, it's supposed to reveal hidden blocks, but it's very ambiguous on where the hidden blocks actually are because of how the perspectives work. How am I missing this box? Come on. See? It's easy every time. I should never be missing that box, but for some reason I do. Alright, so we have the weapon and the spell. We just need the rest of the orbs, and we can go ahead and fight the boss in this dungeon. Solid jump on that box. Alright, so this next room here has another pretty decently precise position I need to be on in order to make this jump. I need to be right on the edge here. And we got it. Good. It's not super duper precise. Like, it's not frame perfect or anything, but you do have to be positioned very close to the edge of that box just to be able to get to that one orb. So yeah, since we actually did grab the spell, we got a full magic refill. So now we can basically throw zaps around like candy and kill everything in sight. And we really don't have to worry about running out of magic at this point because we're not far away from actually beating this dungeon. So. Kill him. And we had to re-enter this room just to be able to get that box on her head. So we can quickly deal with that. I'm gonna use another use of zap there. And there's the boss room over there. But we're gonna quickly go over here because we still need one more orb. And this is kind of the convergence point where some of the pathways start to converge again because we're right at the end of the ghost ship now. Or I guess we're on the deck of sorts. Alright. Let's do this. So, Billy Bones. Billy Bones. So, Billy Bones moves a lot faster, and the whole idea of this fight is to be way ahead of him because Glendale moves quite a bit slower than he does. And because of that, he can get very easily killed just by not staying ahead of Billy Bones. The other major thing to worry about is that every time Billy Bones is in hit stun, his cannon starts to kind of swing around wildly. When this happens, his hitbox increases massively. So you really do have to be careful when he starts swinging the cannon around. But you can see I'm just kind of trying to stay way ahead of him in preparation and even begin moving away before the hit is even made contact with Billy Bones. So he's probably going to get to the middle here. That should be it. Yeah. All right. So that was actually a really good outing with the ghost ship. All right, so let's have some water. When the throat gets a bit dry, you kind of can start to tell from my voice. Starts to kind of crack a little bit. Anyway, with the help of the ghost ship, we now have reached our final destination here, which is the Ice Peninsula, where the Ice Palace is at, and this is where Sonia resides. This is where our father is held captive, and yeah, the final stretch of the game. This is also the longest dungeon in the game by, I think, of at least about 5 minutes, so strap yourselves in, folks, and enjoy the music. It's also very important that when I jump on any moving block in this dungeon that I make sure to make the jump way earlier than I think. Because if I don't and I do it too late, I end up pushing the block and not getting on top of the block. And when this happens, the only place I can go is on the spikes, which just means death. The fair can lead to a fair decent amount of time loss when that happens. Nice jump. So, Ice Palace, despite being the longest dungeon in the game, it's actually probably the most linear, aside from the first dungeon. Like, the idea of the dungeon is that you need to collect a good, like, you need to collect a whole bunch of the same colored keys and then take them all to one section of the Ice Palace where a whole bunch of different set of colored keys is going to be at. Then you need to take those keys and go to a different part of the dungeon with a different set of same color keys, yada yada yada, same old, rather rinse repeat. And this is kind of how the dungeon, that's kind of how the dungeon works. Now, that being said, some of the rooms are not so clear on what you're supposed to do in order to actually get through them. So that's where the difficulty of this dungeon comes into play. There is also some very, very tricky platforming that goes on in this dungeon. And most people who have ever tried to do this dungeon, they hate this dungeon a lot, and I don't blame them. But I do have somewhat of a soft spot for it, just from how tricky the platforming actually is. I also managed to do a frame-perfect jump into that room, which allowed me to get on. It allowed me to actually get that one cycle. Now let me see if I can. Okay, this is going to be fun. Hey, we still got it. The blind item jump. Let's go. Alright, made that cycle. Quickly grab that token while the platform's moving over there. Oh, by the way, in case you think we were done with perspective trickery, yeah. Those developers, man, they still find a way to get you. Throw a false sense of security on you. I was committed to eventually show that off when I would finally have a decent run of this game, and I finally do have a decent run of this game, so I had to show that off. Nice angle jump. Not the easiest angle jump to perform. Thankfully, in Ice Palace, I'm actually gonna redo this room. Thankfully, angle jumps in Ice Palace have a bit more of an easier time to pull off, just because there is a bit of a visual cue. And it's involving the tiles on the ground that I'm currently walking on. It's the border of the tiles. Another solidly executed jump there. Again, angle jumps are not the easiest thing to pull off, and especially when trying to still go fast. Normally you want to try to set it up for a little bit. In general, a lot of times people want to try to set up their jumps before actually going for them. But once you've reached a point where you're experienced enough with these jumps, you can actually afford to go for them. You will eventually get comfortable enough doing them. Now here's a pretty difficult part to do in the game. Pushing a stack of pushable blocks is really, really hard to do, because oftentimes the stack will bug out and you'll just fall straight through and kind of somewhat clip a little bit into the one stack, or the block at the very bottom of the stack. It looks really, really glitchy when it happens. Alright, so now we're on the red side here, and you can see all these red keys here are being used to open the way. to where our green keys are at. There's a few you already probably saw there, but... Oh, wow, I messed this part up pretty bad. Need to kill that enemy so we can grab the item and despawn him forever. So that's another thing. Enemies actually do respawn if you don't grab an item that they drop, or if you don't grab the items in the room. Alright. I kind of messed that whole part up, but it's fine. We'll just continue on as if nothing happened there. I wanted to grab that white potion at a different point. Anyway, now we're going to start collecting the green keys and start getting everything that we need out of this area of the Ice Palace so that we can finally move on to the green side here, which is obviously where what they're trying to lead us to. And you can see the tornadoes are no longer there, and that's because we grabbed the potion and killed them. Nice job. So we can actually do a 1 cycle here. And we got it. Oh, nope. Nah. We're gonna try again. How this room is normally done, you're supposed to grab the key and then fall down there and push the block forward. But obviously, this is obviously not faster. Okay. Well, whatever. We got out of there. Yeah, so that one room there, you could push the block, but it's about, 8 to 10 seconds. It's time you really don't have to do, especially if you can escape the room by jumping back on the platform that you were standing on to get to that green key. Also, another hidden room here. This one you have to know is there, because you will get trapped in this room by those ice blocks if you don't know about that hidden room. So this is the point in the game where you really do have to know about the hidden rooms. Otherwise, you cannot progress. Like, you just cannot progress if you do not know where these hidden rooms actually are. And here's the dead end of the hallway of the red side here. I'm gonna grab these orbs here, and now we're going to use a zap here, and we're gonna grab this white potion to fully replenish our magic. As well as grab that apple, to refill up on any deaths we had. So I guess while we're busy kind of backtracking and whatnot, since there's really nothing I can talk about currently here, I should probably mention when it comes to potions and items, and as well as enemies themselves, there's a certain level of strength to them, and it has to do with the color that they are. So green enemies are the weakest variants of it, and green items are the weakest variants of that type. After that is the pink enemies and items, and then oh, actually no, it's the blue enemies after that. Then it's the pink enemies and items that are the next level up from that. And then the strongest variants of enemies and items is the white color. So if you grab a potion that's colored white, if you grab a white potion, it will completely regenerate or refill your entire mana pool. And that goes the same for apples with a white leaf. They actually do refill your entire health. So as you can see, here's a green enemy. Doesn't have much health. And you can see how easy it is to die when trying to jump on a block that's on a conveyor belt. But you just have to kind of jump ahead. You have to jump earlier than you think, basically. Oh boy. Alright, this is fine. There we go. Could have done that room a lot better, but it's fine. Alright, so this room here that I'm in now, this is probably one of the worst rooms in the game. That looks like a simple drop-off. Trust me, it's not. It's a very precise jump. The perspective totally does not play around here. And to make matters worse, you have disappearing blocks, and you have to know there's another hidden block there, and then you still gotta get over here, and you gotta do that all in one go. It's a pretty cruel room, but we got through it. And so we just need to grab these items, clear the way, and make our way towards green side. Those other doors lead to blue side and white side, but they're not until a little bit later. So, if you are not aware of how awkward it is to push a big stack of pushable blocks, this room is gonna teach you how bad it is. Gonna use another zap there to clear up all the knights here, and that will serve to clear the way on our return trip there. Because like I said, once you kill all the enemies and grab all the items in a room, they will completely despawn. Good job. I completely forgot about this room. We're actually going to kill those tornadoes because it's actually very hard to navigate through them. We don't really have the room to actually get around them. Okay. Now we're on to... We're going to be kind of doing a bit of a loop around this entire area. This is how green side works. This is also where the weapon resides. And it's very important that I do this weapon room properly. I can potentially softlock if I do this room incorrectly. But first we need the blue key up here, and we're going to grab one more orb. This is the only orb we have to grab in this section. And here's the weapon room over here in the hidden room. Now let's see if we do this right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright. We got the block on his head. Now, it's imperative I do not kill that ghost. Especially if he's in the very far point of the, like, top left corner of the room. Because if that ghost is killed and the block falls in that pocket, you can't push it out. And when that happens, you get soft locked in that room. And that's how you can softlock in the weapon room of Ice Palace. I'm going to slow these tornadoes, and we're going to kill this one here. Grab some... Grab ourselves some extra magic from that big potion. And we're going to start making our way out of green side. Good job. Let's try that again. So again, more backtracking, nothing really much to talk about. These next set of puzzles here are kind of, I think, kind of a little bit lazy. Like, it just... You just simply hold a direction and make the staircase and whatnot. I felt like they probably could have been a little more clever about how they would do some of these puzzles. But... Oh, wow. I can't believe I missed that. Gotta reset the room now. There we go. So we want this stack here to get up here, grab this blue key here. Oops. We're going to make our way out of here. We're going to swap to Zap here, because we got to still kill these ghosts to reopen the door here. And thankfully, we won't have to kill anything for at least a little while. Yeah, you can. Can I save and reset? Okay, yes. I think you have a point, actually. Yeah, you probably could save and then reset. I guess then it's only a soft lock if you do not have the magic to save. Since, as we all know, saving actually does cost quite a bit of magic resources. So, thanks for correcting me there. Now, this blue section here is all about platforming. It's very, very tight platforming. It also is quite a bit different, or it's a little bit different in this category as well, because we actually only need one white key instead of the 2 in any percent. And this is because we have more than enough magic to use another additional unlock spell, which is the spell we're going to be getting at the end here. Oops. I keep forgetting there is an enemy waiting to be zapped there. Alright, so this trick here is pretty difficult. Let's see if we got it. Looks like we are good. Nope. Just a few frames too far in of the block. Okay, I don't think I got it here either. Yeah. You can see I can jump a little bit, but the block is not falling off. That's like a couple frames. Couple of frames away. And unfortunately, the block was only holding on to my head by a single frame, so it just completely fell off my head. And it did it again. This is actually a pretty hard thing to get. Okay, we got this time. There we go. Yeah, it's not a generous window to actually get blocks to fall off your head there. And then here we're kind of working against conveyor belts, trying to push this block. Oof, wow, I was too far to that one side. Come on, come on. It's not hard. Push this block. Please push this block. Oh God. Don't leave me. God darn it. Alright, let's try that again. This is not hard. Just get on the block. There we go. And thus we get our final spell of the game. This is the unlock spell. Also, you might have noticed I didn't actually equip the new weapon. We don't need it. It also does not serve very well on the final fight, just because the all the extra enemies that spawn from the boss that is awaiting for us, or waiting us at the end of this run, the extra daggers kind of cause bad things to happen. So we're better off to just keep with a mace in that situation. Also, the return trip is very, very hard. This room in particular can be very difficult if you don't know what you're doing. I totally messed that room up. Let's try this again. There we go. We're going to skip that white key. We don't need it. We are going to grab one white key, though. And it's going to be the fastest one to grab. And we want to do this because it's a very, very small departure compared to the amount of time you waste to grab a white potion in white side. So we're just opting out of doing it. Alright, so if you want to know what the unlock spell does, it unlocks any and all colored doors. So if we don't have the keys to be able to unlock a door, you don't need it, because you can just simply use the spell to unlock it. It's a very, very handy spell, but it sees its use for a very, very short amount of time. But it does get its time to shine in the time that you do get it, so... However, as for the white key, we're gonna use it to open that door, since we don't need to open it. We don't need to go through it just yet, so... And we're gonna take a little bit of a detour to grab our 12th and final token. And with that, we are basically done with the game. We have one more fight to do, and it's just a couple rooms from now. And depending on how the fight goes, we could be in for a pretty long fight. That is assuming I have a poor performance. But this fight can get out of control really badly if I miss my hits. Good start. Okay. Don't think so, yeah. So each of these hits... Okay. Oh, goodness gracious. So, as you can see here, Sonya is kind of bugging out a bit. This is what happens when there is too many of these enemies on screen. Animations start getting eaten up. And this is also why you may or may not have noticed that the snow stopped falling. I think the developers intended to do that so that you... I think the developers intended to do that so that there would be no more graphical problems in the fight itself. Fortunately, I'm having a pretty poor outing here. I am surprised I got that hit. But yeah, if you do end up missing attacks, her patterns go... She's able to complete her patterns sooner. And what this ends up doing is it means you have to keep up with her at a quicker pace, which can really throw off your game pretty hard. So you can see by just landing 3 hits per cycle, we're able to have more than enough time to get over to this area while she's... Just due to how long her hit stun takes. Uh-oh. God. Okay. Okay, at least I got that hit. Okay, I want to get rid of these. Got the hit there. But yeah, basically the idea of the fight is to... in between attacking her, try to take some pot shots at the ads that she throws out of her arms. Anyway, time is coming up in a very, very few seconds here. There we go. 1 hour and 47 minutes and 12 seconds. That is a very solid run, especially for the detours I had to endure and all the mistakes I made. I will certainly take that. Very, very good run. So I hope you all enjoyed the sequel to Solstice here. Like I said, it's a very, very long game. Quite a bit longer than its predecessor from the NES era. And it does take quite a bit of getting used to, especially since, you know, as far as I understand it, the predecessor doesn't even have weapons to throw. It's just a lot of use of magic and whatnot. But yeah, if any of you ever, if you ever sat down and wanted to be like, man, I want to learn this game, always give me a shout, because I'm always willing to help and always willing to try and get people some pointers on how to make some of the jumps a little more consistent, what I actually look for, and whatnot. But yeah, that's pretty much it. This is a pretty long bout of an ending here, and we're gonna hear this track like 3 times, unless we want to just straight up jump straight to some Pocky and Rocky. I guess I will ask in Discord if I should do that right away. Thank you everyone for the GGs, by the way. I should probably... Where are my manners? But yeah, after this is going to be me again with Pocky and Rocky, and in that particular game, we're going to also be doing a bit of a different sort of category from what is the standard norm. So look forward to that. I guess with that, I will mute my mic and get ready to set up for the next game.